Right, let's begin at the beginning. Seems a reasonable idea. This is where our problem starts. As you can see, there's a blue mark on a white sheet. Now that sheet covers up for safety and to create the proper reflections another painting, well, a painting behind it. Now I had a very large painting that stretched from wall to wall, and this is over brushing of the basic blue colour, which in itself I thought the sheet would have protected it, but and it did it to a large extent, but a small amount of paint managed to get onto the canvas underneath, and I will show you that. Right, yeah, here is a painting revealed, and if you can actually see there's a blue spot right in the middle. It's actually almost absolutely central, which can be very distracting. I'll zoom in on that. Nope, can't do that with this. Oh yes, I can zoom it out, but I can't zoom in any further. Right. If you pan up a little, if we pan up a little way up here, you see up there in the corner. See if we can get it round about there. There's some marks left by abrasions. I might try to fix those as well. I don't really know. It depends on the amount of time I've got available. But that's our problem, and this is how I intend to resolve it. Right, here we have the same painting, which by the way is called Fallow, back on the easel, ready to be fixed. If I zoom in, you can actually see the problem area. Is that and a small bit above that causing the problems for me. I pan round a little. You may be able to see the problem area with the abrasions, which amounts to some paint being scraped off and revealing the underlayer. Right, I propose to fix the dark blue spot. I might do that at a later date. I'm not sure. Okay, that's the problem. Let's begin with the solutions. Alright, one of the most important jobs we have to do first is to prepare a brush for the task. Here we have a Galleria number 2. It isn't a new brush, but you'll probably be using new brushes to do this. I'll only prepare one. I'll usually prepare about 2 or 3. Not that I make that many mistakes. But we start by first cutting off, I'd say about a third of the length of the brush. Right. Let's begin with that. You're going to use a very sharp knife. That's about a third. Move along it, don't pull it, because if you move along it, it'll just go like. Right. There we go. Now unfortunately we got a piece there, right at the end. Right. See if we can get rid of that, or we're not going to get rid of that way, we get rid of it another way. Right, what I'd normally do is to cut a small section out there at the base, to turn it over and cut another small section out there. It's actually easier, if you like, to just cut off about a half of it at the base. Right, let's see if we can get rid of that. Resisting all attempts to be cut away. Right, you can see now we have a very, very small tip, right, which will be used to stipple paint onto the onto the surface, but that's almost perfect. I'd normally cut a piece either side so that there it would be in the center, but that said, I also have some brushes that they've done other tasks that I've cut like that. This is certainly the easiest way to prepare the brush rather than a center bristle. Right, let's leave that at that. I'll move now on to how to mix the paints. For the task of mixing, I'll be using a paper palette, available commercially, and 2 painting knives. Don't necessarily have to use these sizes. It's the ones I have to hand, but that's about the best size for actually mixing the paints in small amounts. That really is for taking the paint off the front and the back of the blade, right, to mix it back in again. I suggest that you don't use brushes to mix, because inevitably it doesn't mix properly with brushes, or it's a harder job, and you'll get residue of one of the colours in near the ferrule, and that may affect subsequent layers if it gets mixed in. Right, I use a method that's akin to a computer method of sorting things called a binary chop. Let's begin with my paints. Now, the paint you will be using is likely to be different to mine. I think for this task you'll be using phthalo blue or phthalo turquoise. I don't know why it's called turquoise, because it's closer to blue than anything I've ever seen. We'll be using blue ultramarine and titanium white, because although I can't find documentation on the colours I use for the sky, it's about as close as I think it would be to the original colours of the sky in phthalo. So what I do now, move the blades out of the way and onto the floor, is put 2 blobs onto the canvas. Right. Right, work out what's the predominant tint or hue, tint or tone, because you can save a lot of time and cost, right? Because you don't want to put too much blue down if it's mainly white. But there again, I put an awful lot of blue down for this correction, and it's probably best if I put a fair amount of white down as well. Okay then, that's a lot of white now for a tiny bit of paint, for a tiny little error. But there you go. Don't make errors. You won't have to do it for this task. Right, here we go. Taking the knives. Right, in my case, I'm going to take a very small amount of that. That's probably even too big. I'm going to take that amount. Right, put that over there, and then I'll take a larger amount of the white. Well, say larger. Right. Now, actually, I'm going to peel off a bit of that because I still think it's too much for my painting. Not definitely too much. But let's mix it thoroughly first. Mix it with that. Okay. Using the other knife, scrape that off. The way it comes in handy having 2 knives as opposed to a brush. Take that off. Not a question of saving money, it's a question of getting a good mix. You always get a better mix with knives than you do with a brush. Well, a more consistent one. You might sometimes like to use a double loaded brush for expressive paintwork, but this I've got to get exactly the right colour. Right, okay then. let's put that in a pile, because that is too, for my work, that's a bit too blue. Bit too blue. So I'll leave that there. Make off, make off, make off. Put it on the tip. Add it to the heat. It's not thoroughly mixed yet, but I know the colour's not, the tone's not right yet. I'm going to take off another bit of white. I'll put that over here. Right, and I take a small bit of this. And I'll mix that with it. Okay. Right, lay that down. I don't think I've taken that down enough, actually. I'm going to put some more in. Now, don't mind if I go a little bit over. You'll see why in a while. Right, mix that properly. Okay, I think that will do. Get it into a pile. Right. My hope is that the tone we want is between that and that, right? If it isn't between that, it's still too dark, then we'll take half of that again and mix it with some more white, and sooner or later we'll end up with two colours that the real colour lays between there and there, somewhere there, like that's the objective, and that's the way we approach the problem. Right, we'll make a nice little pile of that. I'm going to have to create space in a while, because this might take about 4 or 5 passes of this process before we actually get it right. There you go. That's the basic of it. That is the basic process to finding the right colour, the right tone. Sorry, we're not finding a colour, we're finding a tone. Well, that was a little embarrassing. It turns out that colour there, I was expecting to have to look for something in between these two tones. I will keep on saying colour, but you'll have to substitute for the word tone, because we're not really talking about colour at all. We're talking about how dark a colour is, which is essentially the tone. This would be a tint, that would be another tint, but it's all about tone. So really it was the tone, this tone here wasn't deep dark enough, so I'm going to have to go in further in the blue direction to get it right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move half of that, not easy, right, that'll have to be close enough, right over there. Unfortunately your samples are getting smaller and smaller all the time. So I'll pull off a tiny bit there, tiny bit. Okay then. Now, waste not, want not. Right. Ooh, look at that. In it goes. Right. Right. Off camera, I'll test that one now. See if that's any closer. And then I'll come back to you. When I think I've got the colour just about right, then I'll tell you how the process went. I went through the process of colour matching.